And so but I sent that to disc jockeys radios, thinking that maybe they would pick up. Well, there's I was and I'm sure that they're happy to see people do
I got my, I didn't buy it. I bought it on something.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chuck White. On behalf of Steubenville for Liberty and American Patriot Council, we want to welcome everyone to the fair tax, flat tax debate we're going to have here this evening. We start all of our meetings with prayer and the pledge. Becky would lead us in prayer.
Welcome. Okay, I didn't hear me. Welcome, everybody. And should we just lower our hearts of prayer? Father, we just give you all the praise and the thankful from the deep recesses of our heart that we can still come into a public building and praise your holy name. We ask you now to give cool and calm wisdom to everybody as everybody comes and goes and does their discussion. I looked some things up on this. The taxes have been with us for years. Father, you know that. You instituted them because in that is first government of Israel, when they were still out in the desert, they were paying taxes to support their leaders in there. Even Jesus was questioned as to what he thought about taxes. Father, we just thank you for these men that are going to stand up here and give us wisdom and let us follow through then. And we know, Father, that the best thing that we can do is just get out and vote. So we ask you, Father, for help for everybody that is out here and these coming primaries, that we get out and at least do our part as citizens. And for all this, we give you thanksgiving, praise and honor, glory and power. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Congressman Johnson, will you lead us with the pledge?
Absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you all for being here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. We got a fairly small group tonight, so it'll be an informal discussion, and so we'll just treat it like a family dining room conversation, if that's okay with you guys. And everybody will get a chance to put their 2 cents worth in. Let me tell you a little bit about how things are going to run. We're going to have from 6:45 to 7 o'clock. Oh my goodness, that we got started real quick, so we're way ahead of schedule already. But that's all right.
I'll make up for it.
That means we'll take up some more time. Let me introduce our 2 panelists, and then we'll give them a chance to say what's on their minds. And open it up. We have with us tonight from Americans for Tax Reform, Mr. Will Upton. He's going to talk to us about the flat tax proposal. And then Jim Ullum is going to talk to us about the fair tax. Each of them will have 10 minutes. And then Will give a rebuttal for about 5 minutes. Then Jim will give a rebuttal for about 5 minutes. And then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll let you folks kind of direct the traffic from there. Now, somebody's the timekeeper. Who's the timekeeper? You're going to keep us on track. Well, we're way ahead of schedule, so you don't even have anything to time yet. But I think it's safe to say that we are all here because we share a common interest. We got one of the most onerous tax codes in the free world. A tax code that continues to take more and more and more from the American people. 35% corporate tax rate, pushing jobs overseas. And you've got an administration that has an unquenchable thirst for even higher taxes. Every time we turn around, what's coming through the House of Representatives is from the President and his allies in the Senate are more requests for more taxes. We're $17 trillion in debt, and every time we try to have a conversation about how to address our fiscal issues, it comes back around, as far as the President is concerned, to more spending, higher taxes, no need for Washington to live within its means. I disagree with all of that. And I know you folks do here as well. And I dare say that everybody in this room agrees with the principles that we stand upon. A smaller government, less intrusive government, a government that lives within its means, a government that balances its budget, that's open and transparent, that works for the people, not over and above the people. And that's what we're here for. I'm going to turn it over now and let Jim give his. Will's going to go first and give his flat tax proposal, and then we'll let Jim step up and present the fair tax. So we are ahead of schedule. So gentlemen, you can use your discretion. Okay, here we go.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Great to be here in Steubenville. I haven't been out here, I was telling people earlier, since when I was in high school, played high school football in Zanesville. Please don't judge me. Played against Steubenville all 4 years. Some of the best games. And all 4 years, my freshman year, we beat Steubenville's freshman team. Sophomore year, we lost. Junior year, we lost 73-10. And we came within 3 points my senior year. That junior year was we were a pretty bad team.
Tonight's an uptick.
Yes, definitely. Here to talk a bit about the flat tax and tax reform in general. I work on the state level for Americans for Tax Reform, so I focus on state tax policy in 16 states, including the state of Ohio, where I was born and raised. Basically, mainly out of the Midwest to the Great Plains, and have some really interesting things going on the state level. But first, kind of a 30,000-foot view. This past tax day, Jennifer Harper, a writer for the Washington Times, noted something very interesting, and that is that the current U.S. tax code is nearly 4 million words long. That's 7 times the length of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which is one of the longest works of literature out there. 75 years ago, the IRS Form 1040, which you all have to fill out, was only 2 pages long. Today, it's 206 pages in length. Both on the federal level and the state level, tax reform is badly needed. Currently, we do have a lot of hope on the state level. On the federal level, we need the Senate, we need the White House before we can move some very serious tax reform. Although we're starting to get some proposals out there. This year, the Camp bill was introduced. Dave Camp introduced a tax reform bill I'll talk a little bit about later. It's both got good and bad in it. Need to see some changes on the back end, but it does begin the process of tax reform. Reduces the federal rates to only 3 rates. Reduces all 3 of those rates from their current position, starts to deal with the corporate income tax. Our corporate income tax federally is the highest in the world, or higher now than Japan, which is a severe competitive disadvantage to other countries, and begins to deal with issues like territoriality and bringing money that's abroad back into the United States. But on the state level, we've made actually some very good progress. In terms of flat tax, North Carolina has probably enacted one of those pure kind of flat tax reforms we've seen. They had originally had 3 rates in North Carolina, 7.25%, 7%, and 6%. The governor there, Pat McCrory, 2 years ago now passed tax reform in the state, and they actually reduced that and consolidated the brackets down to 5.75, and eventually they're going to move to 5% in 2015. This has actually been tremendous for the state. The state's seen record job growth. People are moving into the state. They're leaving states like South Carolina, even another red state that they're competing with. They're leaving Virginia in droves, and they're leaving the other states surrounding. Not yet Tennessee. Tennessee has zero income taxes. Soon to be pure zero income tax state. They have a gross receipts tax. And that's something we're seeing all across the country too, as these states start to move towards tax reform. In Kansas, they have a little bit more of a hybrid model. It's a mixture of a consumption tax and an attempt to zero out their income tax. Kansas originally had 5 income tax brackets. They're now down to 2. By 2018, their top rate will be 3.9%. Their bottom rate will be 2.3%. Next year, the governor tells me they plan on coming back, installing revenue triggers that basically whenever the state exceeds a certain amount of revenue, it'll buy down those rates with the eventual goal of basically cruising to 0. Kansas and North Carolina are probably the 2 states right now that have the best chance by probably about 2020 to get to 0 income tax. At ATR, it is our goal, we call it 50 by 50. By the year 2050, we'd like to see all 50 states at 0 income tax. There'll be some stragglers: California, Illinois, Maryland, Connecticut, but they'll come around when their economies crash because they have high taxes and everybody else around them has no taxes. But beyond that, for years there's been kind of this idea of a flat income tax. What is a flat income tax? In our mind, it keeps with the idea of the founding fathers of equality of opportunity. It doesn't pick winners and losers. Everybody pays the same rate. Most studies show that the acceptable rate's around 15%. So everybody pay 15%. This could work. There's several different ways people suggested it could work. The Camp bill is starting to kind of get there with the consolidation of rates to 3. Next year, Congressman Paul Ryan is going to be introducing 2 pieces of legislation, one dealing with tax reform, one dealing with entitlement reform, which is something, and a whole beast unto itself. It's something we do need to address daily as well. I'd like to see a third component to see some regulatory reform too, but that could also come as just a benefit of tax reform. So 15% rate, flat rate across the board. What would that look like? Well, if you had a company that's just a general firm that made a profit in any given year of $3 million, total revenue of $6 million, so they had a profit of $3 million. You've got wages are paid out in $2 million. Then another $1 million going towards whether it's stock dividends or whether it's bonuses or any type of corporate purchase. All that's taxable. It would be taxed at a 15% rate. That corporation would pay about $900,000 in taxes from their $3 million profit. That wouldn't just cover the corporate rate, though. That would also cover all their employees and their tax liability, as far as the federal income tax is concerned. So the employees wouldn't have to file anything at all. Only the corporation would. The IRS has kind of looked at this. There's been some studies done out of Joint Committee on Taxation, which basically scores all the congressional tax bills that come through. It's a committee made up of both members of Congress and members of the House and members of the Senate. Their general opinion is today there's 130 million different entities that are taxed in the United States. That's individuals and corporations. Under the flat tax plan, that would be reduced to about 8 million. It would dramatically reduce the size of the IRS. Wouldn't get rid of it entirely, but it would dramatically reduce the size of the IRS, and those people, mainly S corps and LLCs, that would still have to file an income tax form themselves, and not just the corporations. They would be able to file it basically on the back of a postcard. It would take you about 15 minutes to file out, fill out your taxes, and send it in. Today, an estimate takes upwards of 15 to 48 hours in for an individual to file the taxes. Beyond that, that's just one proposal. The fact is there is not one specific flat tax bill that we can point to. There's a lot of proposals out there, but this is, again, one reason that we view it as a process of dealing with tax reform, a process of trying to deal with the powers that be. You're going up against a lot when you start wading into this. You're going up against unions, you're going up against spending interests in Washington that don't want to see their special credits and deductions eliminated. We had to fight these guys in Kansas. We had to fight these guys in North Carolina. Who some of these, they don't get the big picture. They don't get the picture that everybody's rate's going to be lower and it's going to be a more equitable system. where everybody knows what they're paying. Instead, they want to fight through the little carve-outs, and that's worrisome. But as we've shown on the ground in Kansas and in North Carolina, we can get there, and we can get towards a flat tax system. You look at states like Washington State has a flat tax, basically, or so they have no income tax. Delaware, it's a blue state. They have a flat corporate tax. That's why you always hear of all these corporations incorporating in Delaware. It's because they can predict what their tax rate's going to be because it's 8.75%, and they know what they're paying. And we see that. The fact is, we like to think of taxes in a bubble. You know, we live in Ohio and we pay X amount in taxes. But when you're talking about businesses, they look at it as a competition. They will locate wherever they can do business the cheapest. And the key is to make not only a state competitive, but the United States competitive. And the flat tax is, in our opinion, one of the best methods of doing that. Fair tax has its benefits too. In general, though, we would just like to see overall, at ATR at least, revenue neutral tax reform. We don't want to see tax reform as a doorway for Washington to come in and raise taxes. We had this fight in '86. We had it again in the early '90s under Clinton. It's been almost 20 years since we've had any form of tax reform. And within the next 3 years, I think we're going to get there again and get something very substantive done. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Let's go now to Jim and let Jim talk to us about the fair tax.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Will. Happy Tax Freedom Day, folks. In case you didn't know, today is the day where you start earning or making your own money. You're not supporting the government beyond today. I think it was 25 years ago. It was mid-February, right? And now we have to work all the way through mid-April. Just a quick question. How many of you think that the income tax preparation is confused and difficult? Right? How many of you do your own taxes? How many of you do your own taxes without software? TurboTax? Okay, so 4 of you. Is it really difficult? It's not, is it? It's not. It is high school. It's grade school math.
That's all it is.
That's it. Now, it might be confusing for the tax preparers that you pay to do it, but for the general population, it's not confusing. Right? So when you hear people say, oh, we've got to replace our tax system because it's so confusing. No, it's not. That's not the reason we've got to replace it. Do you realize there's only one industry in American history that has grown up strictly, its sole purpose is to help the American people comply with the law? There's no other industry other than the tax preparation industry. You have to grow a whole industry just to comply with our tax structure. Right? Like Will said, how many million words?
4 million words.
4 million words, 77,000 pages, all telling you what your income is. Once you get through those 77,000 pages and you find out what your income is, it's easy to multiply by whatever your rate is. It's getting through that and finding out what it is. Does anybody here, and I know this is, it's tilted to the audience is, but does anybody here not know about the fair tax or didn't know about the fair tax prior to tonight? Or
I'm not sure what fair tax.
not sure what? Okay, super. At least a couple. When Congressman Johnson has his telephone town halls, and I've been on a couple of them, and it's an outstanding idea, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be on there, or just to listen in. One of the questions is, I'm talking about taxes, and press 1 if you would like a flat tax. Press 2 if you would like a consumption tax, or the so-called fair tax. Press 3 if you would like to remain where we are, status quo. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 60 to 70% of respondents say flat tax.
It's a large number.
It's a significant number. Those are the people that have never heard about it. And we have got to get out and tell them. Okay, so what is the fair tax? Very simply, it removes, deletes, does away with income tax, both corporate and personal. It deletes the payroll taxes, both the individual side and the corporate side. It deletes the estate tax, the death tax. It deletes the capital gains tax. And it deletes the alternative minimum tax, which I understand is on its way out right now anyhow, and replaces them all with an embedded sales tax, national sales tax, retail, on all new goods and services. Which says if you go out and you buy a used car, there's no sales tax on it. You buy a new one, there is. Right? So the more you buy new goods and services, the more you're going to pay in taxes. Now, that also, along with that, is what we call a prebate or a household consumption allowance, which gives you, and don't mistake this for welfare, but it refunds the tax that you would pay up to the poverty level for your household. So in other words, instead of paying the tax on things that you buy and then turning around and having to send in a rebate form, the government will send you this check at the start of the month for what your household would be expected to pay on the necessities of life. Now, what that amounts to, and just a quick rule of thumb that I've adopted, it'll be $190 for each of the first 2 adults. And then it will be $70 for each additional adult or child in the household. You notice I'm not saying family. It could be 4 college students rooming together. They're not with their parents, so they are a household. So what it will do, and I know Steve has brought this up before. Steve Curtis here is our state director for fair taxation, Americans for Fair Taxation, and I love it. You get a refund back on your income taxes, right? Most of us. What that is money that the government has either overcharged or over withheld. And you have to tell them how much they withheld so that you can get it back. It's money that was owed to you. If we did the same thing with the sales tax, at the end of the month, you would have to file a form that says, here's what the necessities of life cost me, give me my tax money back. So rather than do that, we just automatically send it to you. What's fair about it, it is every American household. So where my wife and I would get $380 for the 2 of us, anything that we spend on new goods and services, the government is basically exempting us on our taxes up to a certain level. Once we have hit that level, anything we purchase beyond, that's our choice. And it's our choice to make tax payments when we buy it. Now, the way the bill is written, the tax will be embedded in the price of the product. When we remove the corporate rate, prices will drop. Based on the industry, it'll drop anywhere from 15 to 30%. Because obviously if a company is not paying these taxes, it can afford to lower the rates or lower its prices. And people say, well, how do I know they're going to do that? They're not going to just keep the money. Well, if you all remember about, was it 6 or 7 years ago, Chrysler came out with the employee pricing, where you could buy a car for what the employees pay. 30 days later, both GM, Chevrolet, and Ford came out with a similar campaign. Now you can say there's one of two reasons that they did that. The first one is that they all three had the same or similar ad agencies who just happened to be working on the same concept, and Chrysler just came out a little bit early. The realistic one was that Ford and Chevy saw that Chrysler was eating their lunch and they jumped on it. If one lowers their rates, the other will lower the rates. Now you plug the fair tax in, it brings them back up so that most prices will be right about where they are today. The good news is illegals, foreigners, anybody in our country, when they go to Wally World or wherever, they will pay our taxes. There's no avoiding it. So I guess Carol's going to stop me, so I will go ahead and stop, and we'll open it up for questions.
15 seconds left.
Oh, I have 15 seconds? I think I better stop now. She is. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. All right, Will, you want to rebut?
A couple quick points. One, with the fair tax, one big concern that anybody that you start to get involved in tax policy and you want to look at kind of the machinations of Congress, one of them is dealing with the prebate, which I would contend is structured very similar to a Social Security check or a welfare check, and it looks like a part of an entitlement program. I understand the arguments that it's not. I just kind of tend to think it doesn't look quite like it should. But anyways, one of the big issues with the prebate is it treats everybody as an individual. It doesn't actually look at need and the way they want to. Everybody gets a prebate, everybody from the very poor to Bill Gates. One, that's not going to fly politically in Congress. So there's going to be restructuring of the current prebate structure. Two, it would treat, under the prebate, a married couple that's childless would get a bigger prebate than a single mother with one child. That's really not going to fly. You're going to have Democrats crawling out of the woodwork screaming about that, pushing for a bigger prebate. So the cost of the prebate system is not as advertised. It will probably change because of just sheer inertia of politics. That's a concern. I just don't think the numbers are right there. Is it still structured as 23% federal poverty line? Somewhere around there?
The poverty line is it, but the fair tax is.
Yeah, well, the federal, and in that regard too, the federal poverty line is an arbitrary number that was come up with in the 1960s. It's a back of the envelope calculation that's indexed to inflation. It has nothing to do with an annual analysis of where incomes are really at either. So basing anything off the federal poverty line, I think, is somewhat dangerous because the federal poverty line is not a real thing. It's just something that has not been updated or changed or even looked at since the 60s when it was conceived of. Two, beyond that, talk a little bit also about the price drop. One thing that is concerning too, it's nice about the flat tax versus the fair tax. Flat tax doesn't mess around with the Federal Reserve at all.